Welcome to Kids Corner. Sir Winston and I were looking at some pictures in a photo album. It all came about because we started a conversation this morning about hair. Now, since this pandemic, you can't go to the hairdresser, and my hair's starting to get long and it's kind of sticking out in places, and it's starting to annoy me. And Sir Winston, his hair will only grow just a little bit length, and then it'll stop growing. And I told Sir Winston when I was little, I had hair so long that I could sit in it. And I was trying to find that picture to show Sir Winston, and I'm sure I'm going to find it, and perhaps I'll show it to you too. And you know, sometimes I think Sir Winston may have been feeling a little jealous because I could grow long hair and he couldn't. And I said, you know, sometimes it's funny. When we have straight hair, we'd like curly hair. And when we have curly hair, we'd like straight hair. And I was just showing him some pictures now of when I was in the last part of high school. I got a perm and my hair was totally covered in tight curls. So, we kind of like to do different things about hair. And that reminded me of a story from the Bible about hair. And I thought, well, why not tell you and Sir Winston this story? So like any good story, it started a long, long time ago. And this was after the Israelites came out of Egypt and were back in the Promised Land, but no longer were they in control of the land. The Philistines were now the leaders and the government in their land. And so one day, a lady was out working in the fields, and an angel of God appeared to her. And he told her that she and her husband would have a baby. And that baby would begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. But since that baby was going to be dedicated to God, during the baby's whole life, it couldn't drink alcohol or wine or have a razor near them. In other words, they couldn't cut the hair on their face, their beard, they couldn't cut their hair. And even while she was pregnant, she couldn't drink alcohol and she couldn't eat unclean food. So eventually a baby boy was born, and they called him Samson. And when he grew up to be a man, a young Philistine woman caught his eye, and he told his parents that he wanted to be married to her. And they said, "Are you sure about this? Why don't you find a nice Jewish girl?" No, he wanted to be married to the Philistine girl. And that started off a chain of events that didn't go well. The families had got together and they were having a wedding feast that went on for probably about a week, and then the marriage was really to start. And the Philistines had arranged for a party of about 30 guys as an honor guard for Samson. But it was probably more about them being guard Samson from the rest. So Samson gave them a riddle to solve. And he said, if you solve the riddle, I will give each of you a regular suit of clothes and a good suit of clothes. And if you can't solve the riddle, then each of you will give me a regular set of clothes and a good set of clothes. And the riddle was hard. They couldn't think of what the answer was, so they went to the young woman who was to be his wife, and they said, "Get us the answer to the riddle, or we'll kill you and your father." Well, she was upset, and she thought, I've got to get the riddle. So she started to cry. And, Samson, tell me the answer to the riddle. Samson said, I haven't even told my parents the answer to the riddle. And she cried, and she cried. She cried for 3 or 4 days of that wedding feast until at last Samson told her the answer to the riddle. So she had told the men in the group, and the men told the answer to the riddle to Samson, which meant he owed them the clothing. Samson knew where the answer was from, and he got rather cross, and he went a long day's walk away to a Philistine city. He killed 30 men, took their clothes, bought the clothes back, gave them to the 30 guys, and then stamped off to his parents' house. Sometime later, when his temper cooled off, he went off and he went to the bride's father's house and said, well, I'm ready to begin the wedding or the marriage. And the father said, well, I didn't think you wanted her, so I gave her to the best man. So Samson got a little upset again, and he arranged for their harvested wheat fields to be burnt, their olive trees, the grapevines, huge fires. And it was more than just the fathers. So the Philistines asked, what went on here? Why did this happen? And so they'd been told it's because the bride's father had given the bride to the best man. So the Philistines kind of took out the revenge and killed the bride and the father. Then Samson decided he should have the revenge, and he killed some more Philistines, and then he went to a cave. And so Philistines came hunting for him. Now the Jewish people were a little concerned because here were their rulers, and they were very upset and cross. So the Jews knew where Samson was, and they went and they found him. And they said, the Philistines are looking for you. And Samson said, do you mean to kill me? And they said, no. So he said, you can tie me up and take me to the Philistines. So they tied him up and they took him to the Philistines. And at that stage, he started to feel the power of God, and he broke loose from his bonds, and he picked up a jawbone of an ass, a dead animal, and he made it into a weapon, and he killed 1,000 Philistines. And that was the start of him leading the Israelites against the Philistines, and he was a leader of the Jews for at least 20 years. But I'm not sure that he really learned that he became a good judge of character, because he took up with a woman named Delilah. And after a while, the Philistines still wanted to get rid of him. He was a real pain to them. And so they came to Delilah and they said, each one of us will give you about 20-30 pounds of silver if you can tell us the secret of Samson's strength so that we can capture him. And Delilah thought, yeah, no, I think I'll accept that. And so she would say to Samson, tell me the secret, how you could be tied up and subdued. After a while, Samson said to her, well, if you tied me up with 7 thongs, which is like 7 bowstrings of a bow and arrow, the string on the bow, well, I would just be like an ordinary man. So she sent a message to the Philistines, and she said, hide in the house. And when Samson went to sleep, she tied him up with 7 bowstrings. And then she woke him up saying, "Samson, Samson, the Philistines are amongst us." And up he jumps and poof, he breaks off the bonds. And so she knew that was not the answer, and the Philistines remained hidden. Some nights later, she was saying, "Samson, Samson, tell me the secret of how you can be tied up and subdued." And Samson said, "Well, if you tie me up with new ropes, that would make me like an ordinary man." So she sent a message to the Philistines again, and she tied him up with new ropes when he was sleeping. After a while, she went, "Samson, Samson, the Philistines are amongst us." And up jumps Samson, and whoosh, breaks the ropes again. So Delilah and the hiding Philistines knew that wasn't the answer. And so she waits a few more days and she says, "Samson, Samson, tell me the secret of how you can be tied up and subdued." And Samson said, "Well, if you take the 7 braids of my hair and weave them into a fabric, I can be subdued." And so one night when he was asleep, after she had sent a message to the Philistines who were hiding in the house again, she takes his hair and she weaves it into a fabric. And this would be from a loom that you could have kind of beside you on the floor. It's not like a big floor loom. And she says, "Samson, Samson, the Philistines are amongst us." And up jumps Samson, and with him comes the braids in his hair and the loom. She knew it wasn't the answer. The hiding Philistines knew it wasn't the answer. So Delilah was getting really upset, and she was saying, "Oh, Samson, Samson, you know I love you. Tell me your secret. You're making a fool out of me." And she went on and on for days. And at last Samson said, "Well, the secret is I've been dedicated to God and I can't cut my hair." So she sent a message to the Philistines and said, "Come on a certain night." And on that night, when he was sleeping, she arranged for one of them to cut his hair. And then she said, "Samson, Samson, the Philistines are among us." And up jumped Samson, expecting to be strong as he ordinarily was. And instead, he just had the strength of an ordinary man, and the Philistines that were there captured him. They blinded him, and they threw him in prison. Well, the Philistines were really happy that Samson had been captured. So they arranged a big celebration at the temple of one of their gods. And they thought, what would make this celebration really good is we should send for Samson from prison and have him do some stuff to entertain us. So Samson was brought in, and he did a few things that entertained them. And they said, "Oh, well, that's kind of enough." So Samson said to the servant that was with him, "Please, can you lead me to a pillar that supports here so that I can lean against it and have some rest?" So the servant led him to a supporting pillar for the temple, and Samson leaned against it, and he started to pray to God. He said, "God, please give me the strength so I can have the revenge for them blinding me." And during the time that he was in prison, his hair started to grow. They didn't keep cutting it. And God gave him the strength, and Samson put a hand on each of the 2 pillars, and he pushed them over, and the roof came down, and thousands of people died. In that stage, he had killed more people during what would become his death than he did when he was living. And that's the story of Samson and about his hair. It's it's a story with a lot of death. And at that stage, it was a really hard time. And the Israelites saw many of these people as their enemies, and they prayed for God to deliver them. And leaders arose among them that led them against their enemies. And here Samson was one of them. But there was also other stories about hair in the Bible. Jesus had said to his disciples that they were more precious to God than the sparrows, and in fact, God had even numbered. He knew the number of the hairs on their head. And that's a nice thought, that God knows us so well that he knows how many hair we have in our head. Shall we have a little prayer together? If you could bow your head and repeat after me. Loving God, thank you for loving us so much that you know the number of hair on our head. Thank you for sending people to look after us. Thank you for the people who look after others. Help us to be kind to people and look after your world. Amen. And we'll see you next time at Kids Corner.